Very well, then, in this class we are going to be talking about the necessary tools to work with inverter equipment. Whenever we are going to work on electronic boards, we are going to need some specific components or tools. Speaking about the soldering iron, we are going to be buying a Goot brand soldering iron, as we can see here, a 40-watt Goot brand soldering iron. There are many on the market, but these tools that I show you are proven tools that we use, that work well, of good quality, at a good price, and not investing more than necessary. There are those electronic kits, electronic tool kits, that sometimes we do not use most of those pieces. I am going to indicate precise tools that will serve you exactly for what you are going to have to do. We start talking about a 40-watt Goot soldering iron. What else? Well, we also need a desoldering tool. As we saw in the soldering class, we are going to need a vacuum desoldering tool. In this case, the model I recommend is the Goot GS108, which I am going to show you. This is the one we recommend. A very good quality tool, which requires constant maintenance. You have to open it and remove the tin that accumulates inside. If possible, also clean the sealing rubbers well, that is, the internal part. And once we do the cleaning well, we reassemble and continue using. In case we see that it gets a bit hard or does not seal well, what we can do is apply a little graphite grease. These types of sealing greases are ideal for that. Very well, there we have our vacuum desoldering tool. Remember Goot model GS108. Very well, we continue advancing and we are going to talk about supports for boards. This type of board supports are sold for a very economical price, for $18 to $17 on Amazon. It is highly recommended. Firm safe. The metal, this plastic part better because it is insulating and it will serve you to work with inverter boards just as you will find it on Amazon or AliExpress. Support for electronic card. Very well, another tool that you are going to need is the microscope. Here I am showing you the microscope. Notice that it is a very simple model that is really economical. It costs $35. This microscope, despite being very economical, is of very good quality. It works very well and is more than appropriate for what you are going to use. Notice that you can see the microfiber. It has the option to take photos. You can add a memory card. You can connect it to the computer and the computer recognizes it as a webcam. The battery lasts a lot. So a microscope of this type is the one we recommend. You will always need some kind of magnifying glass, perhaps with light, to enlarge and be able to see components that cannot be seen with the microscope. A very important detail, when you buy the tin soldering iron, do not forget to also buy a stand because since we are starting with electronics, we are new and sometimes we do not know that the soldering iron can cause damage to us or burn something. So always buy a soldering iron stand and in that way you will work much safer. These types of sponges also serve to clean the soldering iron. They must be wetted with distilled water, and every time we use the soldering iron, we pass it through here and there. We keep it clean for the next soldering. In this way, of course, once it is hot, if you cannot get this sponge, you can get these vegetable-type sponges that are used for makeup at pharmacies. Well, speaking of tin, since we are in tin soldering, in this case, what I recommend is to buy good quality tin. The problem is that if we buy a tin with the characteristics we need but of poor quality, the internal resin is the one that is usually of poor quality. So, the problem is that when soldering, the solder never applies well in the hot area because the internal resin that acts as flux is of poor quality. So whenever you buy tin, please buy a good quality one, which is a little more expensive but lasts a long time. If you are not going to dedicate yourself exclusively to electronics, a quarter kilo, 250-gram tin roll will last you a very long time. The measures you need are as follows: tin lead composition 60-40 and filament diameter 0.7 millimeters. For those who are in Argentina, you can get this brand. For those who are in other parts of the world, you can commonly buy the Goot brand. Desolderer or desoldering Maya, we always recommend the Goot brand. The thickness of the tape can be between 3 mm and 3.5. The length depends on what you buy. In this case, it comes 1.5 meters. But this is the thickness that we are going to need for the SMD components with which we have been working in the course. You also need tweezers that can hold, cut components, cut wires, prepare little cables to be able to make bridges. So you always need these tweezers that are going to be exclusively for electronics. Notice that they are small. An important detail: do not use these tweezers to install air conditioners because they will not last long. Have your exclusive toolbox for electronics. Silicone. After soldering boards, it is important to cover them so that they are again isolated. So a silicone gun is essential for that. We talk about this silicone, the silicone that is applied, which is hard, and when heated it melts, it goes energized. We cannot apply clinical silicone. This has to be the one we can apply on boards, knowing that it does not produce continuity between contacts. It is available in bookstores. Heatsink compound. We are going to need it because we have many heat sinks on inverter electronic boards. This heatsink compound can also be purchased from the Goot brand or a good quality one that you may find in stores where they sell computer supplies, and it is the paste that goes between the component and its aluminum heatsink. Of course, in this case you are seeing it wet because in the previous course I applied it and this component was not used. But when we disassemble a component that has been working, this paste is completely dry. So you disassemble, change the component, and before reassembling it, you have to apply new heatsink compound. This is essential so that the component does not burn instantly when you apply it. There's what the heatsink compound does is fill the cracks that remain between the component and the heatsink and transmit the heat better so that the heatsink can dissipate it. So you have to have heatsink compound when working in electronics. Don't forget the isopropyl alcohol for board cleaning. We are always going to be using high-purity isopropyl alcohol. We are always going to apply it with a brush. Are there components that clean better? Yes, such as, for example, paint thinner, but they are corrosive and harmful to certain components on the board. What we are going to use to clean electronic boards is high-purity isopropyl alcohol that contains a purity of 99.8%, and we are going to apply it with this brush. We moisten the brush and we can clean without fear, obviously with the board disconnected. Very well, another tool that will also be very useful is the multimeter. UT brand multimeter. This model that you can buy that brings the capacimeter and everything you are going to need is the UT61A. There are many UT brand multimeters, but this is enough. Can you buy a better one? Yes. Can you buy a worse one? Yes. But if you buy a worse one, there are measurements that you will not be able to make, and if you buy a better one, you will have functions that make the device very expensive, and you need to carry it, climb stairs, climb roofs, so buy this UT61A, which has all the functions we need. For example, the UT61E model has a computer connection, I don't remember well, but who is going to use it connected to the computer? I think that is air conditioning technicians. We are not going to do that. So it seems better to buy one that has the functions we need. This one has the capacity to measure capacitors up to 200 millifarads. We are talking about 200,000 microfarads, more than enough for our boards. Please leave a comment if you have any questions.